our lesson, Tim Junkins.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Love the chairs. The chairs are nice. I'd like to tell you about a friend of mine, but I can't remember his name. I'd like to tell you about a girl I once fell in love with, but I can't really remember her face. I'd like to tell you about someone in my life who was a bad influence, but I don't really remember why. It's kind of odd how that works, how the passage of time, we kind of lose grasp with certain facets of who we were. Through our busy lives, we have to work, we have to be involved with family, we have to be good, God-fearing Christians, we have to be sociable. Being sociable is difficult because you have to wedge it in somewhere, and an hour for lunch, a couple hours for dinner, maybe a cookout on the weekends every now and again. Football season's a great time to socialize. You get together, you scream together at the television. But it's difficult. It's easier these days. Technology, social media, things like that. There's people that I've managed to stay in contact with despite my best efforts of not really reaching out to them directly, but I get to watch their families grow, I get to watch them settle down, I get to watch them pursue their careers and their hopes and their dreams and things like that, and it's become easier. But there are still people that we just lose track of at some point, for some reason or another. The passage of time, we just don't have it. Maybe they wronged you in some way. Maybe there's a reason you've cut them out of your lives. Maybe there's something going on. The reason I'm bringing this up today is because what I've noticed with people, because I know a lot of people, socially, through work, through church, through any number of organizations I'm part of, I know a lot of people, different walks of life, different paths, things like that. And almost every single person I've spoken to who once had faith, but then lost it because of people. There's always a story about somebody who went to church, was a God-fearing Christian, and at some point just got wronged at some point in their lives, and decided that if that was what God was represented by, then they didn't want to follow it anymore. And so they left. They just gave up on it, they walked away. They decided that they were hurt too many times. They had gone to too many different types of churches. They had met too many Christians, as it were. And they had decided that they just didn't want to be part of it anymore. They had put in the effort, they had put in the time, they had put in the prayer and the scripture and everything else, and they just couldn't pull it together. And so they wound up walking away in the end. And so it's one of those things where when we go through our lives, as Christians, when we attempt to live a good God-fearing life, and we have the struggle about being the best that we can be as Christians, that when we go and we try and we try and we try and we sometimes fail to be the best people that we can be. And it's one of those things that we have to ask ourselves, where are we putting our energy into? Last month I talked about the idea of the spiritual crucible that we go through as people. That every one of us, regardless of our station in life, regardless of our job, our education, our family, our upbringing, regardless of any of those things, at some point in our lives, we go through spiritual crucibles. That's what I talked about last month. The idea that when we get through that, we are forged into something newer and better and stronger. And then at the end of my lesson last month, I proposed the question, where do we go from there? And that's what I want to talk about today. The idea of what do we do when we are attacked constantly with our faith? How do we avoid being in situations like that? The real question is, how many of us have come that close before? Please, no show of hands. But it is one of those things that internally, was there ever a time in your life where you sat down and you really thought about it and you really invested the time and you had to ask yourself, is Christianity worth it for you? Have we been in that point? And If you want to share that with me privately, that's perfectly up to you. But I will share publicly today that I've been at that point. That there was a point where I sat down and I looked at things and I had asked myself the good, long, hard question, is Christianity worth it? I was in college. I was in college studying to be a minister, and I was asking myself, is this really worth it? Because time and time again, I had seen the hypocrisy of people. I had seen the mistreatment of others. I had heard words spoken behind people's backs. I had seen what humanity could potentially be. And they were the future leaders of churches. And I looked at that, and I sat down, and I called a friend of mine, and I said, I don't know if it's worth it anymore. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can be this person that I need to be. And there's a long pause, and my friend on the other end goes, I don't think that's really the point you're trying to bring up right now. Because isn't the whole point of Christianity that we are not able to be that all the time? We are not able to be the strongest version of ourselves. If I got my 8 to 10 hours of sleep, and I ate my Wheaties in the morning, and I got up there, and I had the best attitude ever, and I had the right balance of caffeine and everything else, I could be the best version of myself for probably about 12 hours, and then I would get tired again, and I would not be the best version of myself. And so after we go through these spiritual crucibles and we become stronger for it, the trade-off is not that God looks upon us and says, oh, well, you've gone through your spiritual crucible. You've gone through your crisis. Check mark, A+, gold star, good job. No, it's until the next time something like that comes up. But the trade-off is, despite the best and the brightest and the strongest and the smartest of us, despite all those things, it is never required of us to take on these things alone. I've spoken on this topic before, although I can't specifically remember when, the idea that our faith is an investment, and where are we placing that investment? The question is, are we like those who have left the faith? Are we putting our faith solely in people, so that when the time comes and when those people fail us, it is an opportunity for us to look at and go, oh, well, God isn't worth it. That person's not perfect. And believe me, I'd love to be perfect. I'd love to get up every morning and have a perfect day and be perfect in every way. But it is not a requirement of us. The passage of Scripture we're going to be looking at is out of Psalm 94 today. The idea of where do we draw our strength from, so that when we go through these circumstances, we can be strengthened not by ourselves and not solely on the encouragement of others, but we can be strengthened by God. Looking at Psalm 94, starting in verse 12, before I get to that, it's important to know that the way we live our lives, the company that we keep, the people that we have stick around in our lives. Because those people I talked about in the beginning, those kind of ghosts of people, the phantom images of people from my past who are not present anymore, are not there because the passage of time, they're not there because they don't need to be, they're not there because they weren't adding anything to my life. And the people that I've surrounded myself with in my life, the people that are there, though perfect they are not, they are an encouragement in my life. The people in my church family, the friends I keep, the people I affiliate with, they're the ones that encourage me. So that when I'm on the phone with a friend 300 miles away while I'm in college, and I go, I don't know if I can handle this, I've got the right kind of person on the other end to not say, oh, well, it's probably not worth handling. No, they take a long pause, and then they say, I don't think that's really the point. The point is you're supposed to be investing your faith in God, not in people. Amen. And so Psalm 94, starting in verse 12, blessed is the one you discipline, Lord, the one you teach from your law. You grant them relief from days of trouble, till a pit is dug for the wicked. For the Lord will not reject his people. He will never forsake his inheritance. Judgment will again be founded on righteousness, and the upright in heart will follow it. We'll continue on just a second. But the idea that God in the Old Testament, God in the New Testament, is a force, is a presence that is there with his followers every single day. And that is a constant in their lives. And though I love my friends and I love my family, and it'll probably break my mother's heart to say that she is not perfect, because none of us are. Sorry, Mom. But we are not perfect, and we have our moments of weakness. We realize that as we get older, as we grow into adulthood, we look at the ones that we have looked up to our entire lives, and we realize that, oh, they're just people too, and they're just trying to figure out the best way that they can. A friend of mine who had a baby last year had a quote on his Facebook page, and I just absolutely love it, because it speaks volumes about the idea of not being perfect. And he says, some days you look at the dog chewing on a teddy bear and the baby chewing on a dog bone, and you just go, oh well, I guess it's close enough. And so it speaks volumes about the idea about how we as people are not perfect, and we are just trying to do the best job that we can, but we don't have to carry that weight by ourselves. And it speaks in greater volumes, starting in verse 16. Who will rise up for me against the wicked? Who will take a stand for me against evildoers? Unless the Lord had given me help, I would soon have dwelt in the silence of death. When I said, my foot is slipping, your unfailing love supported me. And this is my favorite verse out of this section for today. When anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought me joy. The idea that we carry so much weight around with us as individuals. We are proud people, especially Americans. We are raised in a culture of being independent, that we are a strong country, one nation under God, etc., etc. The idea that we can be independent, and there is nothing wrong with that, and there is nothing wrong with being strong individuals who do the best job that we can. But often we trade that out for the mentality of, oh, I have to go it alone. I've got problems in my life that I can't possibly explain to anybody without first sitting them down for about 45 minutes and a PowerPoint presentation and going, okay, here's why this is a problem right now. And so, as opposed to sitting people down and talking about it, I internalize it and I say, I've got to deal with it on my own. I've got to figure this out on my own. I've got to work out an answer. There's a really great quote I wanted to pull. I used an analogy last month from a TV show, and there's a great quote from the beginning of the second season of that show where one character is talking to the main character, Oliver, who has come back and he's decided to save his city, and in order to do that, he must maintain what is known in the superhero world as the secret identity. And so to the world, he is just an ordinary millionaire, if there is such a thing. And it's one of those things where he has maintained this persona, but secretly he is fighting this battle, he is fighting this war, and he can't share it with anybody. And he's trying to talk somebody down from taking rash action and lashing out against the world. And that person accuses Oliver of being out of touch and, I've spent more time in the back of police cars than I have in limos, so I don't see how you could possibly relate to me. And he starts to turn away, and Oliver grabs his arm and he looks him square in the eyes and he says, the world doesn't work anymore. It broke a long time ago, but it seems like you were the only one who noticed. That makes you angry. And you're afraid that anger is going to burn you up inside if you have to live in the world 1 second longer knowing that you could do something to fix it. That anger is going to put you in a hospital, kid, or worse. And he was trying to reach out to him the idea of internalizing this anger, this notion that the world is broken, but everybody else around us hasn't noticed. And so we lash out against the world, and it makes us weaker as people. The idea that there are circumstances in our life that can make us so angry, that can burn us up inside, that can consume us so intensely that it will destroy us spiritually, is how this kind of relates to that. I've got people at my job who do a rather amazing job of keeping me in check. I've got one coworker in particular, I can't stand talking to him sometimes. But in those right moments, I'll be so flustered and so angry. And he'll stop and he'll look at me and goes, "You need to ask God to help you out right now." And it's one of those things where I want to stop and I want to tell him to stop being so optimistic all the time. Because that is part of that anger that we deal with in the world. That is part of that spiritual crucible that we go through again and again and again. That when God puts people in our lives that are so positive all the time, and you look at that and you wonder, how can they be so positive all the time? Well, the truth of the matter is, they're probably not. They've probably got their own things going on. They've got their own battles to wage. They've got their own philosophical war against crime to fight. They've got their own vigilante efforts they have to make in order to be a better person. But in the presence of those who need it, they put on that best face possible, and they're there in the exact moment that we need it. And so when I look at things like that, when I look at the people I talked about at the beginning of the lesson today were from an era so long ago that it predates social media, predates the internet as we know it. And so, there just wasn't an opportunity unless you really put in the effort. And nowadays it's easier to keep track of people. It's easier to surround ourselves. It's easier to get those little blurbs on Facebook every day. Those little encouragements that people put up. Those little moments that make you smile. Those really dumb cat videos. There's something scientifically proven about cat videos to where they're dumb and they're everywhere and you can't help but smile when you look at them. And so life is divided between the little victories and the big victories. And where do we get that from? And so looking back in the scripture, I really like the way it's phrased from verse 16 on. Who will rise up for me against the wicked? Who will take a stand for me against evildoers? Unless the Lord had given me help, I would soon have dwelt in the silence of death. It's a rather extreme example set by the author, but something that is true in our lives. We may still be here. We may still physically be here, but spiritually we'd be dead to the world without God. We would walk through day to day. We would look at the bad in the world. We would look at everything that was going on, and we would become so consumed by depression and anger. Because I was not always a Christian. I was not a young Christian. I was a young Christian by some standards. I became a Christian in high school. And so there was a lot of part of my young life where I just didn't have direction. I went to church when I was younger, and then there was a period where I didn't. And then I started going again, and the world made a little bit more sense. That monologue, or that dialogue from that TV show, talks about the idea of the world being broken, but you're the only one who noticed. And that's the way I feel sometimes. But with God, that example doesn't stand. Because you look at it as the world broke a long time ago, but we can do something about it, is how that changes. If we put ourselves in the world with people that encourage us, if we put ourselves in the world with people that give us strength, with people that give us focus and encouragement, if we can find the right place to be to where we can get away from that attitude, to get away from that anger that I'm speaking about, then that dialogue changes completely. It no longer is a hopeless sentiment about being burned up by anger and being consumed. It's no longer about that. It becomes a message of encouragement. about how the world broke a long time ago, so let's do something about it today. And I'm not asking us to enact global change. I'm not asking us to go out there to, change the world in such a radical sense, but to just start with the life around you. Start with the people in your life. Look at the ones who are there. Look at the ones who encourage you. Look at the ones who don't. Make those tough calls. Make those tough decisions. But always know that despite where we are with people, even the good ones, that will fail us eventually. Verse 18, when I said my foot is slipping, your unfailing love supported me. When anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought me joy. I've said this line before, but the one thing we never really give God credit for is the unlimited scope of power, because we often have trouble comprehending it. Because we have to ask ourselves, if I believe in a God that can come to earth and live a life and die for my sins and conquer death and come back from the dead, then shouldn't that God be able to help me fix my problems? It's one of those things where we can't say, oh, God is too busy. God's got too much on his Google Calendar this week. God's got too many prayers to answer. God's got too much going on. God's secretary isn't picking up the phone. These are all sentiments that are not true. We have a direct link with God. We have a direct connection with God. And God is never too busy for us. I just love the line, when I said my foot is slipping, your unfailing love, Lord, supported me. Because we are often slipping in life. We are often close to a point to where when we're outside, and I noticed this especially when I got outside of college, because when you're going to a Christian university, it's great because you've got chapel every day, and a Bible study is not even a stone's throw away, and there's constant support and education and scripture study. But then you get out in the world and you're completely on your own when you're not in those church environments. And so we offer things like the Wednesday night class. We offer activities. We break bread together. We have meals. We do what we need to do to remind each other that we are here for each other. That if you've got something going on and you come to me and you talk to me about it for 3-4 hours, that there's nothing wrong with that. That we are able to sit down, that we are able to parse these things out together and know that on the scope of humanity and the scope of God, that we do not have to handle these things by ourselves. The ultimate help can be found in God, but it is up to us to bridge that connection. I also talked about that last month. The idea that we as people, when we go through these crucibles, when we go through these crises, when we have circumstances, that it is up to us to bridge that connection, that God is sitting there and he is waiting and he is ready to receive us. And all we have to do is just make that connection. Can we set aside our pride? Can we find the balance? The balance between being the best that we can and keeping ourselves spiritually, emotionally, mentally healthy. Can we find that? Can we not let ourselves be so consumed by single problems? Can we find hope and encouragement with God? Really just looking at that idea of, can we set aside that pride? That notion of going to God and saying, God, I've been racking my brain about this all week. I've been trying to figure this out. I've got this problem, Lord. I need a solution. I need to take action. I had that lesson, that do something lesson, that we've just got to do something. And sometimes that doing something is just going to God and asking for his help. And so the encouragement for today is knowing that God is an ever-present force in our lives. That God is a being of unlimited power and knowledge and grace and mercy. And that it is there for the taking, and all we have to do is approach him and say, yes, Lord, I believe in you. I believe in your Son. I believe in his sacrifice. I will be baptized. I will be born again. I will attempt to fix the circumstances in my life that have made me so unbalanced, that have made me so angry. Sometimes we get so angry, we get so upset that it really burns us up inside. And it's really a difficult thing to deal with. And I have been there. And I can describe intimately the feeling, the sickness that comes with it. The idea of having your blood boil so hard and your stomach churn so much. And some of you are starting to get nervous a little bit because you know what I'm talking about. Who will rise up for me against the wicked? God will. Who will take a stand for me against the evildoers? God will. Unless the Lord had given me help, I would soon have dwelt in the silence of death. It's one of those things that you look at that and you really have to wrap your head around the concept of God's unlimited scope and power. And though we can't grasp it as mere mortals, we can at least understand the idea of this being that always has time for us. Imagine a person in your life who always has time to talk. Imagine a person in your life who always has the best advice and the greatest compassion. Imagine a person who doesn't care how long it's been. If I reached out to some of these people that I talked about at the beginning of my lesson and said, "Hey, it's Tim Junkins, how's it going?" They would almost certainly go, "Who?" But God is not one of those people. If I dial up to God, if I pray to God, God is not going to go, "Who? Tim who? Junkins, that sounds familiar. Church of Christ, maybe? I don't know." No, God is not that person. God is the one who, when he sees your foot slipping, his love supports us. When the anxiety is great within us, his consolation brings us joy. I want to wrap up today with just the idea of when was the last time you felt joyful? Not happy. Happy is easy. Happy is watching football and your team doing well. That's happy. Happy is one of those emotions that is so easy to connect with. Hey, my favorite shows are coming back on this fall. Happy. No, joyful. When was the last time you were joyful? And so that's the challenge for my lesson this week, is the idea of asking yourself, when was the last time you were really joyful? The idea that you were so filled with joy and elation that it brought you to tears. When was the last time that you had felt such a strong connection? Don't put God in the same category that we put people in. Where there are people that we lose touch with, there are people we don't talk to enough. Don't put God in that category. Put God in the category of someone you talk to every day. Because I've got a lot of great people in my life, but I don't talk to them every day. Because one, that would be way too time consuming, and two, they would probably get sick of me at some point. Or we'd run out of things to talk about. But we can't put God in that category. God is someone that we can talk to every day, every second of every day, and have in a presence in our life. And so if you're here today and you're looking for that kind of encouragement, if you're looking for that level of connection, if you're looking deep inside and you say, "Wow, I really haven't been joyful that much lately." Happy is fleeting. Happy can turn as quickly as, "Oh, your team scored, I'm happy. Oh, the other team scored, not happy." That's how fleeting happy is. Joyful is a spiritually deep feeling that you know is there, and you know when you connect with it, and it lingers, and it doesn't go away as easily as something as fleeting as happy, or sad, or hungry, or, whatever we feel. And so if you're here today and you're looking to make that connection, the waters of baptism are available to you so that you can find that joy in your life. If you're here today and you've already been baptized, I've said it time and time and time again, The idea that we go through these circumstances where we need to reach out to people and we need to be encouraged by that. And so if you're looking for encouragement, if you're looking for prayer, if you're looking for counsel, we are here for all of those things. And I ask you to meditate on that as we stand and sing the song of invitation.